Secretariat or the representative. All discussions and participants of the International Examination of the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, as well as lecturers of the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, that we are proud of. First of all, let's say thanks to our God who has been giving us His blessing and mercy so that we can gather today, Thursday, March 6, 2025, offline in the BH Building Hall, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University. In the event of the International Examination of the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, with the theme, the OECD Economic Survey of Indonesia. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now continue with a brief moment of prayer. You are all kindly requested to rise. Please pray according to your own religion and beliefs. The prayers may begin. Thank you, and you may now be seated. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the event will continue with the opening remarks by the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, which on this occasion is represented by the Coordinator of Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, as well as the opening of this international examination event by tapping the microphone 3 times. To Dr. Made Dwi Setiadi Mustika, we kindly invite you to the stage.
Ceremony. Om Swastiastu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues and students, good afternoon and welcome to today's event organized by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD), Forum Kajian Pembangunan, and the Faculty of Economic and Business, Udayana University. It is an honor to host this important discussion on Indonesia's economic futures. But first of all, I would like to welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Andrea Goldstein and Dr. Charles Dennery. Welcome to Bali, and hopefully you enjoy everything in Bali, the weather, the food, and the beach as well. Once again, thank you for coming. Distinguished discussion, Dr. Amrita from Udayana University, and also Ibu Adriana Valentina PhD from Badan Pusat Statistik Provinsi Bali. Thank you. And distinguished guests from BPS Provinsi Bali, the participant from BPS Provinsi Bali and also BPS Kota Denpasar, thank you for coming. Our moderator, Ibu Budi Ningsih from Faculty of Economic and Business, Udayana University. Our lecturers in Faculty of Economic and Business, Udayana University. Economic and Business Udayana University. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the OECD Economic Survey of Indonesia 2024 highlights key challenges and opportunities for our country. While our GDP's growth remains strong, we must ensure macroeconomic stability through sound policies. The report also points out high informal employment, skill gaps, and barrier to investment, which slow our economic progress. Another important topic is digital transformation, ladies and gentlemen. Indonesia has great potential in digital economy, but we need better infrastructure, skills, and also regulation to support growth. At the same time, the green transition is critical. Reaching net zero emission in 2060 requires serious commitment to renewable energy and clean policies. This discussion, ladies and gentlemen, is a chance for us, academics, policymakers, and students to exchange ideas and solutions. And I thank OECD and also Forum Kajian Pembangunan for their insight. And I encourage all of you to participate actively on discussion session. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business Udayana University, I formally declare this event open. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the International Examination of Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, is officially open. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is the material or presentation session. The following is the curriculum vitae of our moderator this afternoon. Educational background. Educational background. Bachelor of Economics at Gajah Mada University and Master of Science in Economics at Gajah Mada University. Experience in teaching macroeconomics and also experience in writing about international economics and sustainable development economics. Well, so, without any further ado, let us welcome our wonderful moderator this afternoon, Ms. Niketut Budiningsih. speakers and participants. Thank you, Master Ceremony, for introducing me. I'm Budi, the moderator of today's seminar. I'm very pleased to see all of you here to this seminar on the OECD Economic Survey of Indonesia. Today's seminar is highlighting the country recovery post-COVID, fiscal policy, and also strategies for long-term growth. Ladies and gentlemen, our speakers today is Dr. Andrea Agustin and Dr. Charles Dennery. Let me introduce our speakers today. Dr. Andrea Agustin is in charge of global relations at the OECD Investment Division. He studied at Udayana University and Columbia University. Dr. Andrea Agustin is also a regular lecturer at the Catholic University in Milan. Now allow me to welcome the speaker, Dr. Andrea Agustin, onto the stage. Our second speaker, Dr. Charles Dennery, completed postdoc at Ecole Polytechnique Federal de Lausanne, and before he completed PhD in economics from London School of Economics. Start from 2020, Mr. Charles Dennery has position as U.S. Economist, French Treasury, Ministry of Finance. Now it is my pleasure to invite our speaker, Dr. Charles Dennery. Today we will have two discussants. Our first discussant is Dr. Anna Valentina. Dr. Anna Valentina completed PhD in economics from the Australian National University. Currently, she is working on population and employment statistics with the Statistik Indonesia Bali province. Besides, she is also a lecturer in Universitas Indonesia and Institute of Statistics. Please welcome Dr. Anna Valentina. Our second discussant is Dr. Amrita Nugraheni Saraswati. Dr. Amrita Nugraheni Saraswati completed PhD from Universitas Brawijaya. She is a lecturer in Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Udayana. Recently, she has a joint research with University of Vienna and ASEAN Uninet about disability education. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Amrita Nugraheni Saraswati to the stage. Good afternoon, Dr. Andrea Agustin. Good afternoon, Dr. Charles Dennery. Selamat siang, Mbak Anna Valentina. Selamat siang, Ibu Amrita. How are you? Before the presentation begins, let me inform how the presentation will be going on. Dr. Andrea Agustin and Dr. Charles Dennery will deliver the material for 40 minutes. After that, there will be discussion session for 40 minutes. First,
The discussion session will start by the first discussion, Dr. Anna Valentino for 10 minutes. And continue with the second discussion, Dr. Amrika Nugrahini Saraswati for 10 minutes. Then we will have discussion session for 20 minutes for all the participants. Then now I will give time for Dr. Andrea Agustin and Dr. Charles Dennery for deliver the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers, thank you very much to the moderator, thank you very much to the students, thank you very much to the government of the Netherlands that is supporting this dissemination tour, and thanks a lot for your welcoming remarks. Let me say that we will do our best to enjoy, as you say, the beaches and food and the hospitality of Bali, but also we are here also to pick your brain. What is your views on the Indonesian economy? And how do you react to our survey? But before turning to the survey, I'd like to make a few remarks regarding the relationship between Indonesia and the OECD, because this is a critical juncture in this relationship, and I think it's important to place the survey that we're going to present with Charles in a short while into the greater picture of the relationship between OECD and Indonesia. And next, please. This is a picture that was taken a few weeks ago, in fact, when the Secretary General of the OECD, which as you may imagine is on the website, came to Jakarta to present this survey that we're going to present today. This was launched by the Secretary General of the OECD and the President and the Minister of Finance, Sri Udayana, at the end of November. And why this visit? Because Indonesia has become last year a candidate country for accession to the OECD. And this is a very important moment in our relationship. It is definitely an important moment for the OECD because, as I will show you in a while, if Indonesia becomes a member, the first OECD member country from Southeast Asia. And we like to think that it will also be an important moment for Indonesia, because joining this club of reform-minded countries opens the way for different channels that I will discuss in a while, opens the way for a number of market-oriented reforms which we think are necessary to improve living standards and increase the GDP growth and make the development more sustainable in Indonesia. I don't have to tell you how important Indonesia is on the global scale, because it's one of the largest countries in terms of the population, is a beacon of hope. I think when talking about the possibility of going through a democratic transition and an economic transition at the same time, this has been one big achievement of Indonesia since 1997, and I think we can be proud of that because few countries have achieved this type of transition. It also is an important player in Indonesia in global discussions about climate change, about financial stability, about trade openness, about sustainable development, and about the number of migration, number of global challenges that these days is particularly important and also particularly difficult to tackle. Next, please. So this is what the OECD is about. I don't go through each and every line of this presentation, which I think will be available on the website of the university. But it's important to keep in mind a few milestones, a few dates, and a few facts. The first thing is that the OECD has been around for now 63 years. 62 because it was established at the end of 1962 in December. And it used to be called the Rich Countries Club by the economists in particular. And it's a bit less of a Rich Countries Club for two reasons. One is that some of the rich countries are a bit less rich these days than they used to be, so it's a bit less of a rich countries club. But the other thing is that, as you know, the global economy has changed. The rich countries are the countries that are growing the characterization of the OECD as countries of rich, an organization, a club of rich countries, is somehow misguided. Now it is a club in the sense that membership is not universal. It's in a way by invitation only institution, but a number of countries have joined since 1994, since the last round of enlargement started. Mexico, South Korea in 1997, then almost all the Eastern European, Central and Eastern European countries that were also joining at the same time. The European Union, and then more recently Costa Rica, Chile, Colombia, and other countries. So it is a club. It's less of a club. It's of rich countries, but it's a club of reform-oriented countries. It's an organization that sets global standards, and through the evidence-based discussions, and as a result is one of the institutions that lead in the formulation of the global standards that are the international organizations. Let me give you just an example. It is the OECD that back in the 1970s, the slogan of the polluter pays principle was launched. At the time there was already some discussion about climate change and the environment, but that was still a very incipient, and the OECD in the mid-70s started discussing this principle that the polluter should pay for the pollution, the externalities that it creates. It's, in Bali what the externalities can be, and so the discussion on the global level on environmental principles and environmental policies owes a lot, we think, to the discussions at the OECD in the previous period. And next, please. The OECD is an institution that publishes a lot. I'm sure that you are familiar with the PISA survey, which is published every 2 to 3 years. It's one of the best sellers of the OECD. It's one example of the many out of the 500 publications that come from the OECD every year, which are all available on the internet, on the website of the internet of the OECD, and which are available to you for downloading. And I'm sure that those of you that work on special topics have a familiarity with the OECD publications, but also is a place where people meet. Now, people meet to discuss economic policies. They used to meet much more often before the pandemic. They meet at the OECD, but they also meet elsewhere. In fact, while we think that we are the first ones from the OECD to come to Udayana University, we are definitely not the first ones from the OECD to come to Bali. But some of us come to Bali because it's a very nice place to spend days, but others come here for meetings, and we have organized many global, regional, and also national meetings in Bali. So our global reach is extensive, and it includes non-member countries. And the exchanges that take place among policymakers, experts, one important element of building a consensus and setting global standards through discussions and through dialogue. So that's why the OECD is sometimes defined as a token shop, but it is one where important discussions take place, and important also because at the OECD we do not usually see meetings where delegates read from like the UN, or very often delegates read the statements. At the OECD it's a place where the discussions can be tense, but are usually fruitful. Next, please. As I was saying, the OECD has a global reach, so increasing number of countries that are members. By now, 38 countries are members, and regional programs in different areas. And two important milestones were in 2007, the launch of the dialogue with the key partners. One is Indonesia, the other is China, India, South Africa, and Brazil. So countries that were not, and are not members of the OECD, but which have a strategic relevance at the global scale, and for which the OECD is a key partner, and vice versa. And more recently, a number of countries have started accession processes that includes in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and Peru, and also in Asia. The first one was, as I said, in Southeast Asia was Indonesia in 2023, with the formal start of the negotiations towards accession in 2024. But Thailand is also applied for membership. So our global reach is widening and broadening, and that includes Southeast Asia. Next, please. So, yeah, next, please. This is a picture. So, there have been a number of advances at the region. So we try to work both with individual countries, but also with regional groupings, or at least with regional countries in the same region. So we work with ASEAN, we work with the Asian Development Bank, we work with APEC, and we also have the Southeast Asian Initiative, which was launched more than 10 years ago, and which has been very fruitful because the OECD basically we work on all the topics for which there is a ministry. So we have a Ministry of Agriculture, we have Agriculture Committee, we have Ministries of Education, we have Education Committee, and so on and so forth. The only exceptions are Defense and Foreign Affairs, which are not discussed as such. Defense is not discussed at all, but Foreign Affairs is indirectly, of course, discussed. And in the regional initiatives, we replicate this structure, focusing on the topics that countries consider of greatest importance, for which the OECD is an important global sector, and for which there is a demand on the part of regional countries. So that applies also to the Southeast Asia program, where we work on competition, corporate governance, agriculture, trade, statistics, and investment, and so on and so forth. Next, please. Next, please. So it was last year that we celebrated in Hanoi the 10th anniversary, and one of the important achievements, deliverables of the Southeast Asia program, is to build the bridge between the OECD and the individual countries. So even if it's in a regional context, they do it at the individual level. And one big achievement, of course, of the Southeast Asia program has been the start of the negotiations with Indonesia and Thailand. Next, please. Next, please. So, as I said already, Indonesia will be, I think, will be the first Southeast Asian nation to join the OECD. And next, please. There have been a series of important milestones in this relationship. Let me just mention three, which are particularly important. The first one is four, actually. The first one was the opening of an OECD office in Jakarta, which is used to, for many years, it was staffed by one person because it was difficult to have more, and by now it's a full-fledged office with 5 professionals working on different aspects. The second milestone was in 2023, in July 2023, the letter from the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs and Investment to the OECD Secretary General, manifesting the interest and the commitment of the government of Indonesia to start the accession process. The third milestone was the decision of the Council to accept this, and this was on 20th of February 2024, so slightly more than 1 year ago. It's important the date because, well, one because it's my birthday, but probably the most important reason why that was chosen that date is that that was just after the elections. So a new president was elected, and even if, of course, as you know, there is a continuity, it was important to show that the commitment went beyond the single administration. It's a commitment on the part of Indonesia more generally, and so the second, the decision by the Council to accept. And then finally, the roadmap, which is a very detailed set of dates and the commitments that Indonesia has to make in order to show its ability to stand up to the commitments and norms and the institutions that are set up by the OECD through different soft law instruments. It's important to remember that the OECD basically does first produce many statistics. Second, it's a place where countries discuss economic policies in a non-confrontational way. And the third very important one is that it's a global standard setting institution. So in different areas, for instance, in on issues of fighting corruption, on issues of improving corporate governance, on standards for trade in particular products, including vegetables, fresh fruit and vegetables, for instance. The OECD sets standards which are then used by the OECD countries, but also by non-OECD countries that can join specific instruments. Indonesia has already joined the 14 committees, and it's working obviously on fulfilling the requirements for all the OECD instruments. Next, please. Next, please. So this is the launch of the survey in November, where Minister Mulyani, who I'm very familiar, she's visited OECD numerous occasions, and the Secretary General has visited Jakarta also on numerous occasions. It's important because obviously the personal relationship that is established is an important component of foreign affairs, international affairs. And so that's an important element. Next, please. Next, please. So, making the transition from the first part of the OECD and the OECD survey of Indonesia is rather easy because I'll show you the picture from the Minister and the Secretary General in November. They met to present this survey, which I have a few copies for those. Well, actually, the UGM on Tuesday, we decided to give. We had a few copies, and with the organizers, we decided to give those few copies to the students that were asking the most relevant questions. So I propose to do it also today. And so, one basic finding, sort of finding, is that Indonesia suffered less than other countries during the pandemic in 2020-2021. And at the same time, of course, the recovery was maybe less dramatic because the fall was less dramatic. And the recovery was basically at the first speed of 5%, which actually our colleague from BPS can explain us how Indonesia manages to have a 5% flight, which is a very good growth rate, and is fascinating, the stability of not going much above and not going much below. So it's really 5%. It's both more than median and the average, which is an interesting distribution. So seriously, Indonesia has weathered the uncertainties on global markets. So it's grown at this 5% in years when the global GDP was buoyant, and in years when it was, if not a recession, it was much lower. Which opens the way, of course, to questions about how will Indonesia perform in coming years, so at least 2025, 2026, when there are amazing number of uncertainties on the global economy, which may lead to a weakening of the GDP growth at the global level. Next, please. In the 30 years I was mentioning before, since the democratic transition started and the economic reform program started, Indonesia has grown steadily, and it has grown more or less at the same pace as the rest of Southeast Asia, the key countries which we consider Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And its GDP per capita, expressed in the US dollars at PPP terms, was slightly above the rest of the region, and now is slightly below. So you can see or interpret this figure in two different ways. One is that growth has been steady, which is of course a very positive thing. But a different way, of course, of looking at this is that it could have been even better, because if only Indonesia had the capital at the same pace as the rest of Southeast Asia, then Indonesia would be a bit richer. Now, another thing which you don't see here, but I can tell you, is that when other countries like China in particular, the GDP per capita, which was more or less the same percentage, the same share of the OECD average, which is 20% now, at the time China was growing much faster than Indonesia is doing these days. So, of course, that has to do with the number of factors, some of which are beyond the reach and the control of Indonesia's authorities, but at the same time it shows that GDP growth can be higher for a country that is catching up. Next, please. In the past few years, since the COVID pandemic, but also since the global geopolitical uncertainty started rising around 2022 due to the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, the inflation has come back. Now, as you know better than me, Indonesia has a history of high inflation. It was never the levels of hyperinflation levels experienced by Latin American countries and some Eastern Europe countries, but still it was pretty high, especially in the late 90s. So high inflation is something that belongs to history, hopefully, but came back as a problem around 2022 to 2023. And the monetary policy has been effective in reducing this, knowing that, of course, it's difficult to decide what kind of monetary policy is needed when the sources of high inflation, or at least increasing inflation, sometimes, or often in this case, international, so they're not, there are causes for which the domestic policies can do relatively little. But they do signal, starting a monetary policy signals the commitment of the central bank of a country, in this case Indonesia, to do whatever it takes, I think, to reduce inflation. So it was particularly important that the bank is an independent institution, and it's important to keep this independence in place, because independent institutions and independent central banks have, in a way, braver in fighting inflation than government-controlled central banks. Next, please. Against this background, our latest forecast, which was published in late November, late December, shows that still a GDP growth at more or less 5%, and inflation falling and then coming back a bit next year with higher GDP growth, but still remaining well within limits set by the central bank as an inflation target, and also the government deficit being under control. Next, please. Now, we may change, of course, our numbers in the next release of the GDP growth projections, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, reflecting what we're going to project for the rest of the global economy. Indonesia is rightly close to global trade and global investment, but is still an open economy. Next, please. It's important to, of course, have also fiscal policy in check. In terms of the debt, Indonesia performs relatively well. It doesn't have a high debt to GDP ratio. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that it's shielded from any possible volatility on global financial markets, because for the composition, which is as important as the level of the stock of government debt, composition in terms of maturity, in terms of who is holding the government securities, and also the possible ramification of any crisis in financial markets onto the banking sector. Next, please. At the same time, we are doing for our trust the debt sustainability analysis, and what is our calculation shows that debt levels are sustainable, in particular if there is an increase in revenue mobilization combined with market reforms. So if GDP growth rate becomes higher, together with higher government receipts from taxation, that is sustainable over the long run. On the other hand, if no reforms are made and the government authorities only rely on an increase in the tax effort, there is a risk that over time the debt that becomes unsustainable at that level. Next, please. This is particularly important because, as you will eventually see, this is one particular area where market reforms are needed is in fossil fuel subsidies, because a very important share of the government spending, up to 1/5, it can be even higher. Let's say up to 20% of government spending goes into subsidizing fuel. Now, the problem with that is that it's an inefficient way of reaching its objectives, because on the one hand, it goes against the polluter pays principles. If car vehicles owners are encouraged to subsidize and encouraged to use their vehicles, that aggravates the problems of environmental degradation. At the same time, owners of cars and owners of other vehicles, cars come from middle class and not from the poorest part of the society, so it's also a regressive policy. So it's an expensive policy, a regressive policy, and one which contributes to environmental problems. So the government has started already, and it's in fact has achieved a number of objectives over the past 10 years or so. Has started reducing government subsidies to reduce the price of fuel, but more can be done, and we think should be done. Next, please. Also, because one characteristics of Indonesia, again relative to its regional peers, is that its outlays for social spending and government intervention is rather dramatically lower than for the rest of Southeast Asia. Now, that means that eventually more taxes should be raised, and that the fact that when it's combined with market reforms, also that level can be higher. But you have to remember that that is not a problem per se. As long as the return from the investment that is made using the money raised through the sale of debt instruments, there's no problem. The problem is when the interest rates is higher than the return from investment. Next, please. Let me now turn to Charles for the second part of our presentation.
Thank you. Of course, the macroeconomic policies are important to increase growth and have a stable framework, but in the long run, the key framework, the key driver of growth is productivity. As you know, the productivity per worker in Indonesia is comparable to regional peers, but it's still far from advanced economies, and so there is a strong need in the future to drive productivity up to reach the level of countries like Malaysia and possibly more advanced economies to reach the objective of advanced economy in 20 years. Next, please. And of course, one of the drivers of productivity is education. An educated workforce is more productive. If you have better education in language, in mathematics, in key skills, then you are more productive and you are better able to find a job and in the formal sector often, and create more value. So at the OECD we have the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, that aims to compare student achievement in a standardized way across countries. So the program has been running for 20 or 25 years now, and so we in middle school we look at students and we look at their performance in mathematics, in language, in science, and this is a way to see how countries are doing, and also which methods tend to work in one country or another. And so the aim is to improve the overall proficiency of students. And as you can see, Indonesia has been participating in this exercise for a while. Of course, being an emerging economy, the performance has been weaker than the OECD average. But what's more worrying in the OECD and in Indonesia has been the trend in the past few years because of the pandemic, but even before, there has been a decline in performance. Where with the pandemic, schools were closed, and so the students did not manage to learn as well as before, but their education needs to improve in the OECD countries and in Indonesia, and so that's one of the things we highlighted in the survey. And for us, this means that some of the education reforms that Indonesia has done in recent years need to go further. There is a strong importance to improve teacher training, improve teacher retention. So there was an effort to transform honorary teachers into full-time teachers, but having better trained teachers, better motivated, possibly better paid, is important for Indonesia to improve education attainment. So what is important as well is to make the most of the potential workforce, because when we look across OECD countries, there is a big variation in are women participate or not in the labor force. So some countries are very good and have most of women working and so contributing directly to the economy and to the formal economy. In other countries, the traditions are stronger. We have, for example, Mexico and Turkey, where or India, where female labor force participation is very low. So Indonesia is doing relatively well for an emerging economy, but there's scope to go much further and so that and make most of the workforce. So it has to do with little bit with stereotype, gender biases, discrimination. But one of the things we highlighted in the survey is that improving maternity leave coverage would help in that regard, because then women might be less discriminated when they have kids and when they return to the workplace. So that's one of the policies that could help increase female labor force participation. But to improve productivity, what is also important, what the OECD has found across countries, is that more competitive markets tend to increase productivity, because then with more competition, there's more incentives for firms to innovate and fight rents and make the most of their resources. And so in the OECD, we also have an indicator, which is the product market regulation, where we look at the legislation of the country, and we assign a score, where the highest score implies that the country is relatively restrictive for competition, and the low score means that it's competitive and open to competition. And so we have different categories, and we have these scores. And overall, what you can see is that Indonesia, on average, is more restrictive than OECD countries, than the OECD average. There are some areas where Indonesia is open to business and has simple regulations that allow business to, so for example, administrative burden is low, and so it's easy to start a business, and regulations are not too cumbersome. The examples that you see on the right obtaining a license is relatively easy in Indonesia compared to OECD countries. On the other side, the state involvement in the economy remains important with numerous price controls and regulation, with a big role for state-owned enterprises, which overall we find have a negative role in OECD countries. Of course, in Indonesia, there is a history behind it, and possibly in the past it was justified to do it this way, but to move further and closer to advanced economies, we tend to think that now is a good time for reform of SOEs, and also on the trade and FDI. So the tariffs are not very high in Indonesia, but trade restrictions, import and export quotas are still important, and opening more to foreign trade, to foreign investment would help to leverage this foreign investment to increase productivity in Indonesia, create new firms, new business ventures that would import foreign technology, foreign skills, foreign know-how that could then be replicated in Indonesia. So there is a scope to make markets more competitive. And along these lines, what we also highlight in every OECD survey is the importance of fighting corruption. So for every country, we stress that. It's important because if businesses are to grow, they need to, businesses and people need to know that the rules of the game are fair, that there's a level playing field, and that the public integrity is taken seriously. And so, in particular in Indonesia, we believe that safeguarding the independence of the Corruption Eradication Commission is important to keep public trust in the government and in the country as a whole. So then I move to one of another of our thematic chapters, which looked at the role of digitalization. Indonesia has made a lot of progress in digitalization, but there's still a lot of scope, a lot of potential to increase productivity and benefit from the digital revolution. So for example, we find that relatively few firms have a digital presence and use digital tools in Indonesia, so there would be scope to improve on this. Of course, one of the challenges for Indonesia is its geography with 17,000 islands. If you want to be strong in digital, you need good telecom infrastructure. You need good internet speed, and so infrastructures are very important. What we found is that there is a scope to facilitate and accelerate the installation of infrastructure by reducing barriers to installation, and that would help in extending broadband and making it cheaper with if installing infrastructure becomes easier and cheaper. Then that would make internet access cheaper in Indonesia, while prices are still relatively low, relatively high as a share of income today. And we also highlight the potential of using digitalization to improve public services. So in countries like Estonia, like New Zealand, they are moved very far in this idea that you can create a digital ID card, and then with some kind of centralized portal, you can have access to many digital services, so that can be ordering a new driving license, filling your taxes, declaring that you are moving from one address to another, declaring your kids, and so all this administrative process that in the past would be done by paper, going to a local office. Now most of it can be done online with secured digital tools, and so Indonesia has some scope to improve on this and build this kind of digital infrastructure that will also help bring local services everywhere in the country where maybe the administrative office is relatively far. And in the survey, we also touched on the need to accelerate the green transition, because Indonesia is exposed to the effects of climate change and has ambitious climate mitigation objectives. So, as you can see, climate disasters have become more common in recent years due to climate change, and it's most likely to become even more problematic in the decades to come. Indonesia is exposed to the effect of climate change. Of course, being an archipelago with so many islands increases the exposure to floods and also Indonesia is also located on seismic faults, so the risk of the seismic risk, the risk of volcanoes is also high. But so the climate events will become more prevalent in the future. So there will be a need of adaptation. At the same time, Indonesia has set ambitious targets for net zero emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And so for 2030, there's an objective of minus 43% as compared to the business as usual scenario. That's already very ambitious. And the objective of net zero is for 2060, and so there's a need to accelerate the green transition in the energy sector, in the transport sector, and that it's a very ambitious target, because there's a need to reduce emissions while keeping strong growth rate, possibly accelerating growth, and of course increasing growth while reducing emissions is very challenging. So on the electricity, the power sector, we highlight the potential role of carbon pricing to accelerate the decarbonization. So currently Indonesia relies a lot on coal-fired plants, and of course, when you introduce a price signal, when you introduce carbon pricing in electricity, then this makes coal plants less profitable, and it incentivizes producers to shift to cleaner technologies with renewables, being solar, so renewable solar, wind, hydro, or other fossil fuels, but which are less emitting. There's also an importance to reduce emissions from transport. and for that there will be a need to move to more electric cars, which is also an opportunity for Indonesia with nickel and to play a big role in this transition. But public transports also need to be more developed, and as an incentive for this shift, having congestion pricing, and congestion charges would also help shifting towards public transport, towards cleaner ways of transport, which would reduce emissions and of course reduce also air pollution, which is a problem in some of the cities of Indonesia. So there's also scope to use these incentive and pricing instruments to move people towards cleaner alternatives. And so yes, to recap, this was the survey that we presented, that we published last year. Since then, so President Prabowo has been has assumed the presidency, and so with some policy priorities, and so for these priorities there will be a role to leverage OECD expertise to increase productivity, to make sure that the policy initiatives are done in the most cost-effective and efficient way, and we look forward at the OECD to engage with Indonesia in the accession process and help discuss policies and discuss the best policies from other OECD economies, and possibly other OECD economies can also benefit from learning of the Indonesia's expertise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrea Agustin and Dr. Charles Denery, for giving us such informative and interesting presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the discussion sessions. For the first discussion, I give time for Dr. Anna Valentina.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Honored guests, esteemed colleagues. My name is Anna. I'm from the BPS Bali province, and for today's discussion, it will be my opinion, and there will be nothing related to the BPS. So, do you have my slide, my presentation? No? Yes? Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So, I'm very pleased to read the report, and as I see, it's very comprehensive, and I suggest that students, especially for the economic students, to have a better understanding of Indonesia. It is a very, I'm very suggesting you to read the report. So, next please. So I will start with the key issues that's reported in this book, and then I'll move on to the current performance and the challenges that Indonesia faces. Okay. So it is mentioned that it is true that the Indonesian growth has been steadily at around 5% annually. However, it's still falling short of the president's target of 8%. In addition, we have low tax to GDP ratio compared to the peer countries. In Indonesia, we also face diverse development, which you can see that there's regional economic disparities, where in Java dominated 58% of the total GDP, and the eastern province remain underdeveloped. It is also mentioned that low labor productivity is has limiting the country's economic transformation. Next, please. So, as Dr. Charles have mentioned earlier, that if we talk about economic growth, there are two main sources. For the short term, there is aggregate demand, which consists of domestic consumption, government spending, and also net export as the driver of the economic growth. However, we cannot rely on this for short term. Thus, for long term, for have a more sustainable development, Indonesia should increase the investment, improving the productivity, enhance the global competitiveness, and also maintain the strong institution. Therefore, for this discussion, I will discuss on as we can see as on the domestic consumption side, and then we see on the long-term side. Next, please. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, that Indonesian GDP growth in 2024 was 5.1%. However, it's still falling short of the president's 8% target. This moderate growth rate follows a long-term downward trend, as Indonesia has struggled to return to the 7% growth seen in the 1990s. We can see it later on the next slide. The government's long-term vision is to become a high-income country by 2045. However, this required sustained 6 to 7% annual growth, which seems increasingly difficult under the current economic conditions. Next, please. Okay, as you can see, pre-pandemic, Indonesian growth annually on average is around 6 to 7%. However, post the pandemic, the stagnant, although it is quite high. For example, in 2024, 5.1%, Indonesia is the fastest growing among the G20 countries. However, to have a sustainable and inclusive growth, it is not enough. What if when we see the breakdown of the economic share to the people based on income distribution, data shows that the middle class in Indonesia is declining. Next, please. So, the middle class defined as those people who has monthly expenditure around 6.5 to 7 times of poverty line threshold, wherein to 2024 equals to 2 million until around 10 million rupiah per month. The number is shrinking. The middle class peaked at in 2018, which constitute around 23% of the population. However, in 2024, the number reduced to 47 million or around 17% of population. There's a shift to lower income brackets. 12 million individuals have moved to insecure and vulnerable groups. These groups now total approximately 200 million people, while our total population is around 180 million. What these numbers suggest, it shows us that as domestic consumption accounts for 55% of the GDP, any reduction in consumer spending may impact on the overall GDP growth. In addition, broader economic recovery may not have been shared equally among income groups and geographic regions. The second point I will highlight, next please, next slide, is that Indonesia shows less quality job creation. Ideally, a country should experience an economic rebound. What is economic rebound? It is when the country grows faster than the usual rate due to lower base to get back to the normal level. However, Indonesia never experienced such rebound, as you can see earlier from the graph. This indicates a gap between full employment or the full employment of the potential GDP and the actual GDP we have. While the economic growth at around 5% post-pandemic, real wages grow slower at around 2% than that of the GDP, and the real wage have not reached the pre-pandemic level. Similarly, informality is higher post-pandemic compared to pre-pandemic. So from this, we can understand that most people who are in the middle class, they are suffering lower prosperity. Next, please. This is the graph to show you that the informality in Indonesia is higher than that in the pre-pandemic. So the 5% economic growth we have cannot absorb create the quality jobs. Next, please. Then I will move on the gender gap. So for us to have this inclusive economic growth, we might need to consider the employment between male and female. If we have the full participation from female, then the GDP might grow better. So from this, from the paper, we know that the female labor participation has been solved. It stands at around 53%, significantly below men's at 82%, due to social barriers, childcare responsibilities, and informal work prevalence. Then what can we do to improve female workforce participation? First is by creating flexible work policies, equal pay initiatives, and childcare subsidies can enhance economic inclusion. From the graph, you can see that this is a graph that showing you the correlation between the global gender gap index, which measure how the development in terms of gender in countries and the GDP per capita. As you can see, the black dot shows where Indonesia located. It's located on quite left next to the axis. And from this graph, we know that gender inequality differs based on cultural and policy context, suggesting that government, including those in low-income countries, can enhance gender equality through dedicated initiatives. Next, please. Then I will discuss on this regional development. As you may also understand from the current situation that the Prabowo's presidential try to balancing between the soft and hard infrastructure. In contrast to Jokowi's physical project-oriented, Prabowo emphasizes social infrastructure investment such as education, health, and nutrition. In addition, the budget priorities also have shifted from building the IKN, the new capital city of the Indonesia, and the human capital project. Less funding allocated for the new capital city in 2025 and prioritizing human capital development programs. To address one thing to be considered regarding the regional development is to promoting the regional investment through institutional reform that strengthens the regional governance framework and improving public-private partnership can drive more balanced economic growth across provinces, because Indonesia has this decentralization law that if we take benefit from this, and then the regional development could be improved. Lastly, next slide, please. Okay. Regarding the discussion on the book, that it is true that increased tax revenue might need longer time to achieve. However, better targeting social assistance program and subsidies that has been discussed earlier might work for short term by, among others, supported by the One Data initiative for the social assistance targeting program, as well as the subsidies. Indonesia currently working on this initiative by having this unified database for eligible beneficiaries for the government assistance program. I think that's wrap my discussion. Thank you, and looking forward to having a fruitful discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anne Valentina, for your discussions. Then now we have the second discussion, Dr. Amrita Nugrahini Saraswati.
Okay, I think I will make a simple some kind of summary or opinion, and I want to just come here, not at the podium, so later on we can discuss with the other participants. And maybe from the material that already also in others about the Indonesian economics and also about the initiative that OECD made over the years from the latest 20th century in Indonesia. And we can say that it consists of like the initiative linking between the monetary and also fiscal in Indonesia, and also how we can incorporate the hard infrastructure, like Anna said earlier, with the soft infrastructure now that being pushed by the presidential now at Prabowo's period. And we can take some kind of how can we the earlier say how can we still have the growth or how can we maintain the economics, or how can we develop while maintaining the environment, and also how can we make the digitalization program or project that being held by the government. It's made the base of the growth to now we currently on 5%. Okay, so how can we do that with how can we learn from others, OECD's members or OECD's countries about the initiative that they make? How can Indonesia learn from that? How can we, earlier Ma'ana said about the gender equality, and also if in our latest project that being held by Udayana University and also in Vienna, we also talk about people with disability. How can they have the opportunities to for the jobs opportunities, and also for the education? How can we wrap that in the OECD's initiative? So it can make a great, we can say it can make a great new perspective, new insights that we can learn from others that we can implement in Indonesia, especially in nowadays. A lot of things happen, right? In terms of maybe corruption things or politics, and how the tax affecting people, how the inflation also affecting our day-to-day lives, and the trust, and how about the hopes of the people to maintain their lives as usual, or maybe can move from 5% to the target at 8%. So I think that's we can take from this moment. So I think that's it. We can proceed to other participants that want to ask something, maybe expressing their thoughts, or things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amrita, for your discussion. So I would like to sum up after the speakers describe about Indonesia macroeconomic outlook, then how they suggest some strategies for long-term growth. Then from this, Anna also tell about the current challenges faced by Indonesia, such as about the target of the growth, and also that recently that the agri-government cannot support the growth because there are some other factors. And from Dr. Amrika also tell us about how can Indonesia achieve sustainable environment besides also reach the growth. And Dr. Amrika also hope that Indonesia can learn from another OECD countries about how they can maintain the development. So for now, I would like to give the chance for the participant to ask questions or discuss any issues. If you have any question, please raise your hand. Okay, I have one question. Please give the mic to the participant. Okay, then I already have three. I think I give three participants first.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. So, introducing myself, my name is Wira. I'm from the bachelor students in Udayana. So basically, I have one actually basic question. Indonesia is just becoming a accession candidate last year, and the target to become the OECD member is, I heard this from the news, I'm not sure myself, it's 2027. So basically, from what we see now, it's like from the OECD perspective, like how far actually from what we see from the policies that we got from the government this year, there are many critics actually. Like we say from the last presentation by the presenters, they had like Prabowo's policy about the quick gain, that quick win that he wants. Basically like the free meal program that actually is part of the government's like main program right now. But from some of the critics actually say that it's not a quick win. A quick win would be like from what we have from the government, which is from the education sectors, which is like how the teachers' welfare can be increased, so that also increase anything, the PISA score, like a quick win that is actually the teachers' performance increase. So basically, in that case, like how far OECD will look into like the government, Indonesian government policies that actually can relate to like the key point here is OECD's best practice and also standards. So how far OECD will look into that, the policies that Indonesia government has got this year or maybe in the next few years that will actually see how Indonesia become a member in the target members in 2027. So if, let's say Indonesia does not rely on the OECD best practice of what, let's say that the policies has not gone wrong basically in like this year's, let's say the free meal or any other policies, will that affect Indonesian approach to become a member of OECD, the target member in 2027? So that's my question. Thank you.
Do you want to answer it now or one by one? Okay, for the second question.
Good afternoon. My name is Irene. I'm from UPS, Statistics Bali Province. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you for a very fruitful and insightful presentation from both of you. It looks like from your face that you are really tired, maybe from the long trip that you made it here. So thank you very much for that. Okay. From all of that kind of issues, I think Indonesia really facing complex issues, right? From economic and social and also environment. But from all of that, one point that I want to highlight is about the environment condition of Indonesia. Indonesia has a very ambitious target, I think, where it wants to get a net zero emission in 2016. So when we considering the Indonesia's condition today, like we have a very tight budget where efficiency is everywhere, layoff also everywhere, and the pollution also in very bad situation. What is the benefit from becoming the member of OECD? As mentioned by the first presenter, that the OECD, if I'm not mistaken, is like a club. So from that word, I got the point of where the country really help each other to really have a quality economy and also in a low disparity. So my question is, how and what is the initiative from the OECD, especially with if Indonesia really joining into the club as a member of OECD to really achieve that ambitious target. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ayu. Then now for the third question.
Well, thank you very much for your very fascinating presentations, Dr. Charles and Dr. Andrea. My name is Gede Happy. I'm from DPS Statistical Laboratory Province. It's really interesting. Thank you very much for very insightful presentations. My first questions will be on your presentations. I will say that I agree with what Anna previously presented, that why our economy still it's look like difficult to rebound, getting back to situations before COVID-19 outbreaks. So we realize that we do have facing a scaling effect, and it's very difficult to scale up the economy into the 7% level before the COVID-19 outbreaks. I also have looked to the global economic side, where we consider the share of household consumption proportions. Indonesia actually not the highest countries which relies on the consumption on the household economic consumptions. We rank the 7th ranks among 9 or 10 among considered as Asian countries. We'll also agree that our household consumptions and household expenditures not share equally among the regions, but others were very diverse situations. We have regional aspects still need to be considered, because the center of economics mostly well known as in the Java Island, for instance, we're still facing the inequality within our countries. So what actually the OECD could advise or propose to the countries where we are actually still not really getting back, or we still try to get back to fix this carrying effect itself. And then on the other hand, we also still need to pursue the highest growth as well. That's my first questions. And then my second question is, according to why Indonesia's labor participation in women participation in labor force is among the lowest among the countries in OECD countries. According to this national system account, by 2025, there will be measures in national transfer account, where mostly the domestic activities will be measured as activities to support economics itself. So what is I mean that how OECD will stand on the Eastern. I think it looks like, do we have to adopt all the Eastern ways, like women are always going to make money? I mean that in Indonesia, probably some women are actually not doing going to the office, but they do domestic practices who are not, maybe it's not lower their role on economic activity, but they actually do activity in economics by doing a laundry, for instance. It's for others, for Eastern standard, for Western standard, doing a laundry might be particularly measures by economic activity, which equally representing their role in economic. But in Indonesia, we're not considering, we're still lack of how to measure like domestic activities, which mostly doing by mostly of the women in Indonesia. So what do you think? How to representing the role of women itself on the standard that OECD pays to measure Indonesian labor economics and women's participations. And the last one, maybe it's similar with what Ms. Ayu previously questions. As Dr. Charles mentioned, increasing growth while reducing emissions is challenging and so ambitious. While on the other hand, we don't have any options. Practicing green economy is costly. So what actually the OECD promising to support Indonesia? I mean that, I know that we know that practicing green economics will cost everything very higher than we practice traditional economics. So actually, OECD framework proposed to Indonesia in order to maintain the growth, while not only inclusive growth, but also how we can increase in growth, reducing emissions, and practicing green economic activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. So we have 3 questions. For the first questions, its emphasis more on how far that OECD will look for the Indonesian development policy to make Indonesia become a member of OECD. Then for the second questions, Ms. Ayu highlight about because Indonesia has so complex issues, but Ms. Ayu more highlighting more on our environment conditions, especially because we considering the tightening government budget policies, and also about that what is the benefit becoming member of OECD. Then for the third policies, he asked about it is relating to about the rebound the economy after COVID. It's about the difficulties in scale up the economies. And also the next questions is about labor participation in Indonesia is lowest compared with another OECD countries. And he also underlined about women participation in labor force. And last, his question about OECD support to develop Indonesia developing the green economies.
Thank you very much for the questions and the interest in our work. Now, the first question about the membership process. There are some 50, 60 committees at OECD that were policymakers from the OECD countries and some OECD countries meet. Each of these committees has to validate and based on the application of Indonesia in terms of Indonesia's ability to perform, incorporate into the law, deliver on the specific instruments that are attached to each committee. So the benefit for Indonesia is that the process that Indonesia's the homework sort of that Indonesia has to do in order to present its candidacy in front of each committee. That homework is improvement in terms of the policies in specific topics, which the better policies will lead to higher GDP growth and better living conditions. So it's really the process that is what delivers for the biggest results for Indonesia. And I mean, there are examples in every area. As I say, that our committee structure replicates the structure of governments for each government activity. You can think of, with the exception of defense and foreign affairs, there's a committee, group of people meeting and setting standards. So improving, delivering on the promises of Indonesia will lead to an acceleration of growth. And this applies to environment as well, because again, there are instruments, some instruments Indonesia has already shown its ability to incorporate into laws and implement the content of the laws. Some other areas Indonesia is a bit running a bit behind. And again, the incorporation of the ability to perform is what really may make the difference. Again, there are some specific technical instruments of the OECD, policy instruments of the OECD, which relate to the environment, to bringing the economy, to facilitating the energy transition. Again, the polluter pays principle is an example, and the ability of Indonesia over the next maybe 5 years, 6 years, I mean, in general, for a country looking at the risk experiences, for a country it takes some 6 to 8 years to go through the process of the membership. So it's not something easy. It's time consuming. It's obviously there are many other priorities for government. The government in place can change and also has implications. First, there's new people come onto the fore and so. And then so that also applies to statistical standards, including how to count household costs and the GDP. Now, those numbers are from I think from the OECD, from the World Bank, so they use a comparable definition of the living cost distribution and female living cost distribution. So, obviously, one element which makes the difference across countries is the cultural element, the acceptance of women participating in the workforce varies across countries. Indonesia is an interesting country also because you see here, I mean, there are few women, and in many contexts there are as many women as men. Government, in Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, previous former president. So at the top level, it's a rather equal country in terms of opportunities for women and men. When it comes to other parts of society, this acceptance is lacking. So I think that the cultural element is very important.
Yeah, and just on the contribution of domestic work to GDP, yes, that's an issue that is present in every country. That something that you do at home is not counted in GDP. If I clean myself at home, or if I have a maid, then it's not the same impact on GDP. So of course, that's a reproach that some people do to GDP as a measure, but still encouraging women to take formal jobs. Usually, this is still more productive. So even if we think that the net effect on the economy would not be, I think, one full job, still being moving from a relatively low productivity job or quasi-job to something more productive, and also means that if there's some point an accident in the family, or in the woman is single load with kids, if she has been in the labor force, it's easier for her to maintain a living standard than if she has been very far away from the labor market.
From the discussion, do you want to give any comment relating to the questions? Enough? So after Dr. Andrea and Dr. Charles reply about the question and issue to be discussed, that the benefit for Indonesia, of course, is the guidance for better policy to accelerate growth, and also from the OECD is still encourage the government to implement the law relating to environment. And also about consumer spending is also issues for another emerging countries. Relating to women participating in labor force is also we still need to encourage women to go to formal job because of the benefit to involve informal job, of course with many support. Okay, I guess you still have many questions in your mind, but I'm really sorry that our time is already 4 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, that we finally come to the end of the seminar. Before I close the seminar, I would like to take the conclusion from what the speaker has presented. So the speakers already tell us about how macroeconomics outlook of Indonesia, that also give us three main advice regarding how to support for long-term growth. And also from the discussions, Dr. Ana Valentina from BPS, already from Statistics of Indonesia, told us about the challenge that we still have to face. And also Dr. Amrika also remind us that we have environment problem that we have to solve as well. That's the conclusions. Before I end the sessions, I'd like to thank the speaker for the informative and interesting presentations, the discussion also, and all the participants for very active participations. Before I end the session, I will end with pantun. Pantun is a poem in Melayu culture. In Indonesia, correct is the noun. Come and see beautiful view to Padang Bay. Good choice to attend the OECD seminars. Thank you and goodbye.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the material presentation and discussion session of the International Dissemination of the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University. The event will be continued with the awarding ceremony for our speakers, discussions, and moderator, which will be given by the representative from FKP and the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University. To the FKP representative, who also represents the Bachelor of Development Economic Study Program, Faculty of Economics and Business, Udayana University, I Gusti Agung Ayu Apsari Anandari MSA, we kindly invite you to the stage. Okay, we will now have a photo session. The camera ready? Okay. Alright, in 1, 2, 3, smile. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next, we also have a photo session with all the participants here. So, to all the respective guests on stage, please come together in front of the stage to have a photo session with all of the participants here.